Hey everybody, Brendon Nelson, Sam Dog coming at you guys again for this preview for Seahawks versus the Washington football team from FedEx Field. Brendan, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Sam. Thank you for having me back on.
Yep, and this is going to be quite a tough matchup with the way that defense for Washington has been playing lately. But we do have news that Alex Smith is out, so we're going to be facing Dwayne Haskins, and also we got linebacker Cole Holcomb out with a concussion. Former Seahawk Kevin Pierre-Louis is out, and then running back Antonio Gibson is doubtful for this game. So those are some key losses for the offense, and not really a lot of key losses because we know that this defense is going to be bringing it, especially with the young rookie sensation Chase Young and, of course, Montez Sweat. Those are two of the biggest threats I see on that pass rush. But definitely look out. The main key, first key is for this one is to not turn the ball over against this defense is my first key that my dad and I were talking about earlier. So if we can keep Russell Wilson clean in the pocket to get some good throws out to Metcalf and Lockett and whoever else we got open, then hopefully we can, just control our destiny at this point in this game and just try to get out of this one with a good win. What's your first key, Brendan?
Well, I think it's going to be very tough to keep Wilson clean in the pocket. This is not the kind of game where you're necessarily expecting any offensive line in the NFL to be able to hold up because it's not just Chase Young and Montez Sweat. You also have Daron Payne, you have Jonathan Allen, you even have Ryan Kerrigan, although he doesn't play very much anymore. But there's a lot to deal with when you're talking about that Washington front. And we don't know if we're going to have Brandon Shell. We know we're not going to have Jamarco Jones, and we know we're not going to have Phillip Haynes. So the depth up front is a little thin, and it's definitely dicey going into this game. So my thinking is along the lines of this is probably going to be a pretty low scoring game, and it may be decided by which defense is able to generate points. So this might be a decent week where you scale things back a little bit on offense. I want to see a lot of runs. I want to see us run the ball a lot. We know that Carson is basically 100% and Hyde is as close to 100% as he's ever going to get. So my thinking going into this game against Washington is let's see a tighter and more conservative offensive approach. I usually don't say things like that, but I think it's warranted at this time. And because we're drawing Dwayne Haskins, let's let Dwayne Haskins try to give us the game because he's a guy who will turn the ball over. He's a guy who doesn't really have a lot of good NFL experience yet. He doesn't really have that much impressive on his resume right now. So I think that the main key is play carefully on offense, avoid turnovers, and count on Dwayne Haskins to make enough mistakes to give you the game by the end. That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I agree on that one. And plus, this would be the perfect opportunity because we have no defensive touchdowns yet this season. I think we're due for at least one defensive touchdown. This would be one game to do it if Dwayne Haskins is out there. If we could just get enough pressure and make him make boneheaded throws, maybe Shaquille Griffin or maybe Jamal Adams could possibly be the ones to pull off a pick six, pending if we even have Jamal Adams blitzing, which probably we most likely will. But another thing is, now when we go to the offensive side of the ball, my biggest concern is who are we going to be sticking one-on-one with Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry as they call him over in Washington, because Terry McLaurin is their star receiver on their side of the ball. And then, of course, you got to shut down the running game with is it going to be Peyton Barber, the former Tampa Bay Buccaneers, since Antonio Gibson is doubtful? And
Yeah.
what else do they got for that?
Well, I mean, that's pretty much their whole offense. Their offense was wrapped up in Alex Smith not turning the ball over and Antonio Gibson just eating up all the carries. And he was maybe the best rookie in the league so far this year, or he's up there at least. So that's most of their offense. So they're left with not much. Yes, Terry McLaurin is a great receiver, but they don't really have a quarterback to reliably get him the ball right now. I didn't like Haskins coming out of the draft, and I like him even less now. So I'm looking at those receivers, and I think Washington has a little something going on at the receiver core right now, but I don't think they have a QB at the moment who's going to be able to get them the ball reliably. So I'm feeling pretty optimistic about our defense against their offense. If they had Alex Smith out there, I would say, well, he's pretty good at avoiding turnovers. So at least they can kind of keep it close until the end and maybe maybe one team makes a mistake at the end that ends up deciding the game, and it can go either way at that point. But with Haskins out there, I'm feeling pretty good about this one. So to me, I think the key is just let Dwayne Haskins make those mistakes that we all know he has in him.
Right. And what about the tight ends for Washington?
Do they still have Vernon Davis?
I don't know. I don't think they have Vernon Davis. I was trying to think of, was it a Sprinkle was one of the guys? And then there's not really a whole lot for that offense we can really talk about except
Right,
for just
exactly. There's not much
McLaurin.
going on the Washington offense. Brandon Scherf is one of the best guards in the league. They have a couple of nice pieces on that offensive line. Morgan Moses is another one. But most of their offense is going to be watching this game from the locker room, with Alex Smith being out and Antonio Gibson probably being out as well. So to me, this defense, which has played pretty well recently, against bad offenses, this is another bad offense, so there should be no excuse to not go out there and play really well.
Right.
This should be another one of these games, kind of like we played against the Giants, the Eagles, or the Jets, where the defense just kind of controls the game. Maybe it'll be kind of like that Jets game where New York put together a good opening drive on the back of their scripted plays, but once they got away from that, there wasn't much they could do. So I'm looking for something like that to happen again. And the main difference is I am looking for some turnovers. If there's one thing that has stopped happening lately, this Seahawks defense has kind of gotten away from forcing turnovers. I think we have 3 in our last 3 games, which is not great.
No, it's not.
So hopefully this week is the week where we break that open a little bit, because I absolutely think a single turnover that either sets up an easy score or directly results in a score can flip this game.
Right.
I think it will be low scoring.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I want one of those at least. If we were to force one, we need at least a defensive touchdown, like a pick six to flip the game in our favor. A pick six would definitely do that. Pick six or scoop and score. Now, is Washington's pass defense worse than ours from what I heard from Ed Oliver once on YouTube, the Washington fan?
Well, it's hard to judge this Seahawks defense right now because collectively over the course of this season so far, they've obviously been very bad because we have all those bad games on our resume. The game against the Bills, the game against the first game against the Cardinals, the Atlanta game, the New England game. This defense was one of the worst in NFL history, maybe the worst. And lately it's been much better, but we need to see it a few more times before we have a lot of faith in it. So I think this defense is clearly trending in the right direction, and they're getting to a point where I believe they could allow us to win some games in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're better than that Washington defense. And in some ways,
no, we're not better than Washington defense. I'm talking about like their pass defense, like for the secondary. I
think Washington's pass defense is number 1 in the NFL. I think that their pass rush, their front alone, makes them the deadliest pass defense in the NFL
for their pass rush.
Yeah. And let me tell you, the interesting thing about this matchup for me is it's almost kind of a litmus test for the philosophy of how you build your defense in the NFL right now, because Seattle this last year plus has built from the secondary. They traded for Jamal Adams. They traded for Quentin Dunbar. They traded for Quandre Diggs. They decided to put all these investments in the secondary, and that's not even talking about guys like we drafted Marquise Blair, we drafted Ugo Amadi, a few years ago drafted Shaquille Griffin. That's a little in the past, but this team over the last year and a half has decided to invest everything in this secondary.
Yeah,
Washington has done the opposite. Yeah, Washington's done the opposite. They've invested entirely in their defensive line. I think they have 5 first-round picks on their front line right now.
Yeah,
their entire starting front 4 is defensive linemen. So they built on the line, we built in the secondary, and I would honestly rather have that Washington front than I would have our secondary. But it's very interesting to me because this matchup in many ways highlights the dichotomy of 2 different organizations deciding to build their defense in different ways.
Yeah.
And to me, that Washington methodology has proven itself to be successful so far this year. I don't know if Washington's going to win that division or not, but I think they actually are going to.
I think Washington will win, especially with the way that pass rush has been getting after players. I mean, you saw what they did against the Steelers when they handed their Steelers their first loss of the season. And then, of course, they took care of business against the San Francisco 49ers. It's just Washington to me, man, granted their record, they're hungry. They're hungry for the division, just like we're hungry to try to keep pace with the Rams. And this is definitely basically at this point of the year for the Seahawks, these last 3 games are all must win. They're all important if we want.
Well,
I mean, granted, you mentioned that there's another way for winning the division with 11-5 with beating the Rams and the Niners, but if we
yeah,
want to,
it's very interesting because this game actually means almost nothing to the Seahawks in terms of their playoff positioning. It's the only way this game ends up mattering will be if the Saints or the Packers just completely fall apart.
right,
Now, the Saints, they could lose to the Vikings, I guess. The Saints, they have a backup quarterback out there still. We don't know when Breeze is going to get back. But the interesting thing is, assuming those 2 teams win at least 2 of their last 3 games, Green Bay and New Orleans,
right,
this Washington game really doesn't mean anything for the Seahawks. They can win it or lose it. The season is still going to come down to week 16 against the Rams and to a certain extent week 17 against the 49ers. So it opens up this interesting discussion where I feel like this team needs to win out to build some momentum going into the playoffs. But if we go out there and the field is in terrible shape and it looks like it's not really good football playing conditions,
right.
and you don't want to risk your players, and let's say maybe Wilson's getting hit every time he drops back because maybe we don't have Brandon Shell out there for all we know, or something else happens, it almost makes you wonder, how much do you want to invest in winning this game when you know the season's going to come down to what we do next week against the Rams? I
Agreed.
don't know how this team is going to treat that situation, but it's a very awkward situation that we could be put in if we go out there and things start going poorly.
Right. And I think Drew Brees is actually, they just announced that Brees is actually set to start versus Kansas City, but Michael Thomas is ruled out.
Okay, we'll see. I mean, Drew Brees just broke like 12 ribs and he's 42 years old, so I'm not
Yeah.
really going to sit here and be like, oh, yeah, he's going to go out there and throw for 500 yards and lead the Saints to a big victory. That's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I think Kansas City's winning that game, to be honest. I
Yeah,
picked
yeah.
Kansas City. And then also, I agree with what you mentioned because that message I got from Michael Robinson, shout out to my buddy Anish. If you saw that video, Michael Robinson was mentioning something about that 49ers game in week 17. But I really think to that extent for the division, it definitely comes down to those 2 games. But seeding wise, these next 3 games, as in this Sunday, and then, of course, the Rams and the 49er game
Right.
will ultimately decide it.
Yeah. I mean, this game kind of reminds me 10 years ago, the Seahawks played a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 16. And that game actually ended up meaning nothing for the Seahawks because it had already been determined that the Seahawks would either win the division or be eliminated from the playoffs in their game against the Rams. It's almost a similar situation this week against the football team, where we want to win because we want to build momentum, but at the same time, we also understand that the season is ultimately going to be decided by these games against the Rams and Niners to close the season. And that Tampa Bay game 10 years ago, we lost by, I don't even know, we lost by 4 touchdowns or something. So it's going to be a very odd situation. If I turn on this game on Sunday and I'm seeing Wilson get hit every time he drops back, and I'm seeing players slipping and sliding around on FedEx Field, and I'm just seeing a really messy, ugly game that looks like, good things are not going to happen, and whoever wins, everybody loses, really, because it's just messy. I'm going to start wondering, how much do I want to risk to win this game when I know the stakes are so low? And I'm going to start thinking about, well, we have to win the Rams game, so we need to do what we need to do in order to protect our investment in that matchup. So it's a very weird situation. I don't really know what to make of it, but I'm telling you, if we hit the field on Sunday and I see stuff I don't like in terms of our pass protection and our game plan, like one thing we did against the Jets was we had a lot of short, quick passes to Metcalf and Lockett. And that's something we kind of got away from recently, and I think that hurt us a lot. So I'm hoping we see that again against Washington. But if we don't, then I'm going to start wondering, do we want to, I don't know, do we want to play the long game here or not? So something to watch out for.
So you want us to play the short game, basically. And plus, another thing I'm thinking about is how much will the weather affect? Because I heard Sunday it's looking like cloudy and rain, but by game time at 10 a.m. our time, I mean, well, basically we should look at 1 p.m. their time. Looking like showers with 71% humidity. I got the weather pulled up on Google right now for Landover, Maryland, which is
Yeah,
where FedEx Field is. So, do you see any weather
it's
playing effect with
yeah,
how
it's
bad the
definitely
field is?
yeah. I mean, they said there was going to be 100% chance of rain against the Jets, and I didn't see any rain until the end of the game, honestly. So I don't know how seriously to take that, but yeah, that's another concern too. We, you know, again, winning this game is unlikely to mean that much for the Seahawks team. If we win, we are guaranteed a playoff spot, but the reality is if we lose, we're probably still guaranteed a playoff spot. The Bears are not winning out. The Vikings are probably not winning out. So I don't know. There's definitely some stuff to consider when you're thinking about this game. Like, do you want to put Russell Wilson in harm's way right before the biggest game of the season? Do you want to go all out to beat a team that you don't necessarily need to beat when you have the game of the year coming up next week? So I'm interested and excited in some ways to see how this team approaches this game. Again, the fact that they have Dwayne Haskins makes me believe that we're just a turnover or two away from being able to put this game away, because you don't need to score that many points on this team to put them away. If we can jump out to a 13-0 lead at the start of this game or 14-0, I'm going to feel like the game's pretty much over. I don't think Dwayne Haskins can come back from that. I think that's a huge order for him.
Yeah, but the most important thing is that, like I mentioned earlier, is that we cannot afford for Russell to turn the ball over. This determines Russell Wilson needs to be able to this for what me and my dad were mentioning looking for is how quickly can Russell Wilson get the ball out of his hands this game? Because this is one of those games where he's going to have against that pass rush, he has to get the ball out of his hands fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he should know that. I'm sure he's smart enough to know that. I'm sure
Schottenheimer
against the Jets.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's really all that can be said about this game. I'm feeling much better now that I know Haskins is playing. If we lose to Dwayne Haskins, then, and assuming that we're going all out to win, if we go all out to win and we lose to Dwayne Haskins, then something's not right with this machine. But, yeah, that's really all I can say about this one. Should be able to win scoring maybe only 20 points.
All right. Okay. And I think we pretty much got everything wrapped up on that with that note, would you say?
Yes.
All right. Make sure you guys also go check out Brendon Nelson's channel if you haven't yet. Subscribe. Check out his video game streams. He'll probably be streaming tonight. And, of course, if you're new, hit that subscribe button on my channel. Ring the bell for notifications. And Brendon and I will be back next week for our game preview for when we take on the Rams next week. And we'll talk about when we'll plan that off of camera. But for now, thank you guys for tuning in. If you ain't with it, you ain't infamous. And as always, go Seahawks.